They called me a curse and left me to die on the streets. I returned in silence. But then I bought the hospital that refused to treat me. They called me a curse and left me to die on the streets. It's strange, isn't it? How quickly a home full of laughter can turn into a battlefield of silence. How people who once held your hand in love can later point fingers soaked in cruelty. That evening is etched in my memory like it happened yesterday. The skies were gray, as if they too sensed what was about to happen. Rain had just started falling, soft at first, then harder, slicing the air like cold needles. And there I was, standing at the very doorstep of the mansion I once called home, with my hair drenched, my clothes clinging to my shivering skin, and my heart beating so loud I could barely hear their words. But I'll never forget their words. She's a curse. That's why the baby didn't survive. My mother-in-law's voice echoed like a slap across my soul. The loss of my child had already left a gaping hole inside me, but their blame, their cruel, heartless blame turned that pain into something darker. She brought death into this house. First her own parents, now our blood. She's not a woman, she's bad luck in human form. I looked to Amir, my husband, the man who had once told me I was his everything. His eyes met mine, but they held no warmth, no defense. Just emptiness. Cowardice. He said nothing. Not even a whisper. In that moment, I knew I had lost more than a child. I had lost everything. I tried to speak, to defend myself. Please, I didn't. But my father-in-law raised his hand. Enough. We don't want death in this house. Get out. The servants who once served me chai with shy smiles were now pushing me toward the gate like I was garbage. One of them flung my small bag of belongings into the mud. Another ripped the gold bangles off my wrist. Wedding gifts, family heirlooms. I didn't resist. I couldn't. My knees were weak. My soul was collapsing. I turned once more to Amir. Just once. Hoping, praying, begging that he would say something. Anything. But he simply turned and walked inside. The heavy door slammed shut with a finality that sounded like the end of a chapter, the death of the woman I once was. And then the rain fell harder. I stood outside the mansion, in the dark, in the cold, with nowhere to go. I walked, stumbling down the road, past neighbors who turned their curtains shut, past people who saw but chose to ignore. By midnight, I had collapsed on a bench near the corner of a close bakery. My stomach was empty, my head was burning with fever, and my feet were blistered. I held my arms around myself, shaking not just from cold, but from disbelief. How could they? How could the people I loved leave me like this? The pain wasn't just physical. It was emotional, spiritual. I wasn't just abandoned, I was erased, disowned, dehumanized. That night, as I stared up at the street lamp flickering above me, I thought maybe this was how it would end. Forgotten, alone, cursed. But somewhere deep within, something flickered, a tiny ember of fire. And it whispered, "You are not finished yet." The street was colder than the rain. It wasn't just the temperature. It was the way people looked at me. Or rather, didn't. As if I was invisible. A stain on the sidewalk. That night, I curled into myself, hoping to disappear. I pulled my dupatta over my knees and tried to forget the pain in my stomach. It had been over 24 hours since I had eaten anything. But hunger was easier to bear than heartbreak. The wound inside me, the one they couldn't see, was bleeding louder than any fever. My child was gone. My family had rejected me. My husband had let me be thrown out like trash. And now, the world had forgotten me, just as easily. Morning came slowly, harshly. The sunlight was no comfort. It only revealed more of what I had become, a broken woman on a broken bench. I tried to stand, but my legs gave way. My head spun. Everything ached. My lips were cracked, my throat dry, and the fever that had begun last night now burned through me like wildfire. Still, I walked. One step, then another. I knocked on the shutter of a small tea stall. The man inside opened it halfway, looked at me with pity. and then slammed it shut. Go beg somewhere else, he barked. I wasn't even asking for money. Just water. I walked on, heart pounding louder with every block. I passed a hospital, my last hope. My legs gave way again, but I dragged myself to the glass doors. Kareem Medical Institute, the sign read. A tall, white building, spotless, heartless. I pushed the glass door open. The chill of the air conditioning hit me like ice. Inside, the reception area was busy. Nurses, doctors, patients, all moving like I didn't exist. I stumbled to the desk and whispered, "Please. I'm sick. I have no one. Just something for the fever." The nurse didn't even look up. "Do you have an ID?" I shook my head. "No. But I'll work. I'll clean." No ID, no insurance, no treatment. I fell to my knees. "I've been thrown out. I'm dying." The nurse hissed. "This is a hospital, not a charity. Leave before I call security." My vision blurred. I could barely breathe. I collapsed right there on the cold marble floor. People walked around me. One nurse even stepped over me. Not a single hand reached out. Not a single voice said, "Are you okay?" I lay there for what felt like hours. Finally, someone grabbed my arm. Not with care, but with force. A guard dragged me out the front door like I was a drunkard. He threw me onto the pavement and said, "Don't come back." I coughed. I cried. I begged. But nothing moved them. And as I lay there, cheeks pressed to the concrete, I realized no one was coming to save me. No miracle. No sympathy. No justice. Only me. That night, I crawled back to the same bench. My fever worsened. I hallucinated. I wept for my child, my husband, my past. And somewhere between pain and madness, I made a vow. A quiet, shivering, whispered vow. One day, they will remember me. One day, I will return. But I knew wishing wasn't enough. Revenge doesn't come to the broken. It only bows to the strong. So, I did the only thing I could. I survived. The next day, I dragged myself to masjid. Sat in a corner. Watched. Waited. A kind woman handed me a piece of roti. I took it with both hands and thanked her like it was gold. For days, I sat in that corner, slowly regaining strength. I listened to people. Watched how things worked. Who helped whom? Who ignored whom? And that's when I saw a flyer for a small food stall hiring cleaners. It paid pennies. But I took it. I cleaned dishes until my skin peeled. I worked through fever and exhaustion. But every rupee I earned felt like a piece of power. A coin closer to freedom. I never told anyone who I was. Never revealed my name. To the world, I was just another nameless girl from nowhere. But deep inside, Arifa wasn't dead. She was evolving. Quietly. Ruthlessly. I kept telling myself, they left me to die in silence. But one day, I'll return in silence too, with power. They say when a storm breaks you, it either buries you, or it builds you into something the world has never seen before. I wasn't sure which one I would become. But I had nothing left to lose. The job at the food stall wasn't glamorous. In fact, it was humiliating. I scrubbed greasy plates, wiped dirty tables, and cleaned toilets where no one else dared go. But I did it. Quietly. Efficiently. And I never complained. Not once. The owner was a loud, grumpy man named Pharaohs. He yelled a lot, but he paid on time. Every evening, I would collect my small bundle of notes and wrap them in cloth like they were treasure. I spent nothing on myself. Not even tea. I ate leftovers from the stall, half-rotten vegetables, cold rice, over-fried scraps. But it was enough to stay alive. One night, I overheard Pharaohs talking to a customer about a women's shelter nearby that gave free medical checkups and sometimes offered part-time work. The next day, after finishing my shift, I followed the directions scribbled on the back of a receipt. It took me 2 hours on foot, but I found it, a small building with peeling paint and a board that read, Zoya Women's Center. I hesitated at the door, wondering if they too would turn me away like the hospital had. But inside, I was met by a woman in a faded blue kurta, her eyes tired yet kind. Her name was Zoya. She looked me up and down, saw the bruises, the dirt, the hunger, and simply said, "You've been through a lot. Come inside." Those 4 words broke something in me. Or maybe they started to mend it. For the first time in weeks, I cried. Not out of pain, but relief. Zoya let me stay at the shelter. She gave me warm food, a blanket, and a clean place to sleep. No questions. No conditions. And in return, I offered to help. I cleaned, I cooked, I organized supplies. I watched how the center operated, how donations were tracked, how medical volunteers worked. Zoya noticed. One evening, she asked, "You've got a good mind. Ever worked with papers or records?" I shook my head. "No. But I can learn." She smiled. "Good. We'll teach you." And that's how it started. My real education. In that tiny office, with donated furniture and a flickering bulb, I learned how to read spreadsheets, sort invoices, draft emails, even apply for funding. I learned about the healthcare system, how it functioned, who it helped, and more importantly, who it ignored. And I realized something bitter. It wasn't just my in-laws who failed me. It was the whole system. Women like me, discarded, blamed, broken, were everywhere. Beaten by their husbands, shunned by families, left on the streets with children clinging to their shawls. And no one cared. Hospitals demanded money. Society demanded silence. And all we had was each other. That fire inside me, the one that had flickered in the rain, was now growing. It wasn't rage anymore. It was resolve. I saved every paisa I could. After 2 years, I had enough to rent a single-room space beside the shelter. With help from Zoya and 2 retired nurses, we converted it into a mini health booth. No frills. Just compassion. We treated flu, fevers, cuts, burns, and gave free sanitary supplies to women who had never even heard the word menstrual hygiene. We called it the Care Corner. It was small, but it mattered. The news of our little center began to spread. Donations trickled in. Volunteers came. A student from a local college helped us design a website. People from the city began noticing. One afternoon, a young man arrived with a crisp business card. He was from an NGO that supported grassroots health initiatives. He looked around our clinic and said, "With the right documents, we can get you a major grant. But you'll need to register as a trust. Have you considered becoming the founder officially?" I paused. The word founder felt so heavy, so unreal. Could I really be something more? Zoya looked at me. Why not? You've done everything already. You've rebuilt from nothing. It's time the world sees your name again. Not as a curse, but as a creator. That night, I took out an old piece of cloth where I'd hidden my first ever earnings. I untied it slowly, as if releasing every wound it carried. And I whispered to myself, "You are not Arifa the abandoned. You are Arifa the architect." We filed the papers, registered the trust. And that's how Ramen Wellness Trust was born, in a dusty room with peeling paint, held together by broken women and unbreakable hope. But this was just the beginning. Because as our clinic grew, so did my hunger. Not for revenge, but for restoration, of dignity, of justice, and eventually of the very place that had once thrown me out into the rain, without care, without mercy, without humanity. The day I signed the documents to register the Ramen Wellness Trust, my hands trembled, not from fear, but from disbelief. For years, I had survived in the shadows, treated like a ghost, forgotten like dust swept under rich carpets. Now, my name, was being written in ink that could not be erased. But I didn't use my old name. Not the one they had spat at. Not the name my in-laws used when they threw me out of that mansion like filth. That woman, Arifa, had died long ago. I needed a name that honored my pain, but wasn't chained to it. A name reborn in resilience. So I became Alina S. Raman. Alina, meaning noble in old languages. S for silence. The silence that had once been my prison and was now my sharpest weapon. Raman, not from any family, but taken from a kind older man I met through the shelter, who became our first official trustee and insisted I carry his name as respect. It was poetic. The woman they said was accursed now carried a name that meant compassion and mercy. With the NGO's help, we received our first big grant, enough to renovate the entire care corner and hire licensed staff. We painted the walls bright yellow, opened vaccination drives, and offered safe childbirth services for homeless women. And every single patient who came through our doors got treatment, with or without ID. That rule? It was personal. Very personal. We had a message painted on the wall in 5 languages. If you are breathing, you are worthy. That is enough. People started talking. First in whispers. Then in articles. Local news picked it up. Former street survivor creates health revolution for the poor. My face was pixelated in early stories. I had requested that. I wasn't ready yet. Not for the spotlight. Not for them to know I was still alive. I worked around the clock. 16-hour days. I learned everything I could: operations, fundraising, medical policy, government loopholes. And then one day, I attended a health innovation conference where young founders pitched healthcare models. I didn't plan to speak, but a panelist asked, "What's the biggest failure of our healthcare system?" I stood up, and for the first time in years, I spoke my truth out loud in a room full of powerful people. The biggest failure, I said, is when a woman collapses in front of a hospital and no one helps. Because she doesn't have an ID card. No file. No money. No name. There was silence in the room. And then applause. But I wasn't seeking validation. I was seeking momentum. That night, I was approached by a venture health investor named Samir Malik. He had tears in his eyes. He said, "My sister died because she couldn't afford insulin. Your story, it matters. I want to help." With his support, we opened 2 new satellite centers in underdeveloped areas. Then 3. Then 5. Within 4 years, the Raman Wellness Network became one of the fastest growing grassroots healthcare systems in the region. Still, no one knew my real story. Not my staff. Not my partners. Not even Zoya. I had buried Arifa deep inside me. But she was never dead. Just waiting. Watching. Building. And then one day, I received an email that made my blood turn cold. Subject: Kareem Medical Institute, now accepting bids for acquisition. I stared at the screen for nearly 5 minutes. My hands frozen. My eyes refusing to blink. Kareem Medical Institute. The same hospital that once dragged me across its floor. The same place that told me to go die somewhere else. That place was for sale. Not just in trouble. Not struggling. But on the brink of complete collapse. I read the details. Poor financial audits. Corruption scandals. Loss of patience. Lawsuits piling up. Staff resignations. It was bleeding money. And it was desperate. My mind went silent. Then a voice inside me whispered the same line from that rainy night. "You are not finished yet." I forwarded the email to our legal head with one line. "I want it. All of it. But they must not know who I am." We created a shell company through our trust. Submitted a bid through discreet channels. And within 6 weeks, it was done. I had bought the very hospital that once refused to touch me. No announcements. No press. No grand headlines. My return would not be in drama. It would be in control. And silence. Because cold revenge doesn't come screaming. It walks in calm. And sits at the head of the table. The building looked the same. Tall. Cold. White marble that once seemed so untouchable. But now, it was cracking, just like the system that built it. When I entered Kareem Medical Institute again, this time as its legal owner, no one recognized me. The guards opened the door without a glance. The receptionist smiled and said, "Ma'am, would you like tea?" The irony wasn't lost on me. Years ago, they had dragged me out of this same lobby like I was dirt. Today, they offered me tea. I walked through the hallways, noting the outdated machines, the rushed nurses, the broken wheelchairs. The place wasn't just financially bankrupt, it was soulless. A board meeting had been scheduled. I took my seat at the head of the long mahogany table, the same table where, years ago, they decided who was worthy of care and who wasn't. The staff and former executives trickled in, murmuring, whispering. Most didn't even know who now owned the place. That's how clean we had kept the acquisition. One of the directors, a graying man with an expensive tie, finally cleared his throat. "Ma'am, if we may ask, are you from the ministry?" I looked at him, steady and calm. "No, I'm from the future. The future this hospital refused to be a part of." They didn't understand. Not yet. I stood up, opened a folder, and handed each person a copy of the new policy. No patient will be denied treatment due to ID, money, or social status. Whispers. Disbelief. The head nurse, the same one who had once kicked me out, stared at the paper. Her hands trembled slightly. This is impossible. "We'll lose profits," she muttered. I smiled faintly. "You already are. That's why I'm here." One of the junior doctors, young and nervous, asked, "Sorry, ma'am, but who exactly are you?" I walked slowly to the center of the room, placed both hands on the table, and said, "Years ago, a woman collapsed in this hospital's lobby. She was burning with fever, weak, begging for help. You stepped over her. You called her nothing. Today, she owns this place." The room went dead silent. Eyes widened. Mouths parted. Some in disbelief. Some in guilt. Some in fear. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't scream, "Look at me," because that's not how cold revenge works. I simply said, "From today, we don't turn anyone away. And if that's a problem, the door's right behind you." No one moved. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it just walks back in, where it was once thrown out. Power doesn't always knock. Sometimes, it just walks in quietly and takes its rightful seat. The day after I revealed myself to the hospital board, there was chaos behind closed doors. But in public, everything remained calm, controlled, just the way I wanted. I didn't come back to destroy. I came back to rebuild, exactly the way they never allowed me to. My first act as the new owner was not to fire anyone, even those who had hurt me. No, that would have been too easy. And I didn't want vengeance. I wanted evolution. And I wanted them to witness it. I reorganized departments, brought in younger doctors, eager to serve without discrimination, set up a new emergency unit, completely free for women and children with no documents. That announcement shook the media. Reporters came, trying to figure out who this silent reformer was. My face wasn't revealed. My name on the official documents was still Alina S. Rahman. They couldn't link it to Arifa. The same newspapers that once printed gossip columns about my miscarriage curse now wrote headlines like, "Anonymous woman transforms broken hospital into beacon of hope." Inside, I watched every single staff member squirm, not because they feared punishment, but because they didn't know what I would do next. And that uncertainty was far more powerful than any outburst. Then one afternoon, as I walked the corridors inspecting a newly painted children's ward, I saw her. The nurse. The same woman who once looked down at me and said, "Go die somewhere else." Now she stood frozen, clipboard in hand, her eyes locked on mine. I walked past her. She followed. "Ma'am," she said softly. I didn't recognize you. Back then." I stopped, turned slowly. You did, I said. You just didn't care. She began to cry, saying she was young, under pressure, afraid. That it was a mistake. That she's changed. I didn't flinch. I didn't come back for your apology, I said. I came back so no other woman has to crawl out of here the way I did. She lowered her gaze. I walked away. Because real revenge isn't about breaking others. It's about building something so powerful, so untouchable, that they break themselves just watching you rise. Somewhere along the way, my goal changed. It was never about making them kneel. It was about making sure no one else had to. I stood in the observation deck of the hospital's maternity wing, watching a young mother cradle her newborn, smiling with relief because her delivery didn't cost her a single rupee. That moment, that peace on her face, it was the victory I had longed for. I had turned the very place that once denied me mercy into a fortress of compassion. But I hadn't done it with rage. I did it with purpose. With systems. With silent decisions that echoed louder than any revenge ever could. Still, a storm brewed inside me. One last door remained unopened. One last ghost remained unspoken. The mansion. The house where I had once laughed. Loved. Lost everything. I hadn't seen it in years, but now it appeared in my dreams like an unfinished sentence. My heart was strong now, but something inside whispered, "It's time." That night, I went home to my small apartment, not lavish but warm, peaceful. I poured myself tea and sat by the window, staring at the lights flickering in the distance. Zoya visited. She had finally learned the truth. Who I was. Where I came from. "You don't need to go there," she said gently. "I know," I replied. "But I want to. Not for revenge. Not for validation. I needed to look them in the eye. Not to show them I survived, but to show myself that they no longer held any part of me." Next morning, I asked my driver to take a different route. No hospital. No meetings. Just one stop. A place I hadn't dared visit in over a decade. The streets were oddly familiar, like the city had aged, but never forgotten. And when the car slowed down before the grand black gates of that mansion, I saw it. Faded paint. Chipped walls. Unkempt garden. What was once mighty now looked ordinary. I stepped out, took a deep breath. I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. The gate creaked as it opened. Same gate. Same sound. But everything else had changed. I stepped into the mansion's driveway slowly, my heels tapping against the stone, each step louder than any scream. The air smelled of wilted roses, once symbols of pride, now forgotten, just like the people inside. And then, I saw him. Amir. Older. Thinner. Hunched. The spark in his eyes long dead. He looked up, confused at first. Then his face went pale. His lips parted. "Arifa," he whispered. Like the name itself had returned from the grave. I didn't speak. He stumbled toward me, eyes wet. I thought you died." "No," I said softly. "I lived. You just weren't part of that life." He fell to his knees. Right there in the dust of his once perfect world. "I was wrong. We were all wrong. Please, forgive us." I looked down at him, the man who once stood by and said nothing when they called me a curse. Now begging for my voice. My mercy. I bent slightly, met his eyes, and said, "I'm not here for revenge. I just came to see how small the house had become when I grew beyond it." Then I turned around and walked away, slow, steady, and free. Because true power isn't in making them kneel. It's in walking away while they're still on the ground.